Hi, my name's Gregg Kellogg. I come to you from probably the JSON LD and RDF backgrounds, and my topic is a little bit different than I think most of the approaches that have come here. I'm going to talk about using vocabularies to enable APIs against applications. I believe that it is quite pertinent to what we're talking about here, since I think if we do this properly, then you can use these same principles for annotating anything that other than, even if it doesn't come from the data source that you're starting with. So Hydra is an outgrowth, I think, of the JSON LD work. JSON LD was started as a way to be able to imbue meaning, unambiguous meaning, to data that's expressed in JSON. JSON is probably, I think, the most popular way of enabling RESTful APIs, in the sense that data is retrieved from servers in the form in a JSON form, and many providers such as LinkedIn or GitHub provide APIs for accessing their web services using JSON. But the problem is that as an application writer, I need to adapt to every single API that's out there. So JSON LD goes part of the way towards this in allowing us to express the JSON in an unambiguous way by having all of the properties be associated with well-known URIs and well-known data models for the entity classes and values that are used. That only goes part of the way there, since I can still provide that in many other forms and interact with it using custom logic. What Hydra attempts to do is to define a vocabulary for describing these APIs in the forms of operations on entities or relationships between entities. So you can think of it as being the intersection of linked data and REST, since there's still a little bit of an impedance mismatch. So, problem. How do I use an API without specifically writing something for that? So using a vocabulary, we can define operations on a given entity. We can describe the basic RESTful operations of read, create, update, delete. We can also provide other types of operations on that. So for instance, if I have an entity representing a sports team, I might want to comment upon that, so I can describe on a comment property an operation to provide to create a new comment or to modify a comment that might already exist up there. So the proposition here is that annotations are then the result of performing operations on these entities. So I have a sports team, I perform a comment operation. The result of that is a new entity. Now this allows me to treat those comments as first-class citizens that can in turn be commented upon, replied to, or whatever. So the use case that we have is in your sports, where we're attempting to use these principles to completely build a very rich and deep application layer for providing a social community around deep knowledge about sports. We have standard operations such as I want to follow a team or a player. I want to like. It's along some spectrum of like and dislike. Like you can imagine, as sports fans, people can become quite animated about actively disliking or being an unfan of some player. Sharing content, asking questions, suggesting relationships. There's many vocabularies that allow us to describe these types of operations. Many of them are now available in schema.org, and a lot of the proposals that we've been working on are looking at ways to extend schema.org to be able to talk about some of these operations. Looking at at this page in particular, so I can imagine a range on various different topics that show up here, operations such as follow, forward, like, all of these are expressed in they're defined in terms of a JSON-LD entity relationship, which is then pulled in as I reference more and more things, and those operations then turn into operations back on, in this case, the source server, in order to be able to do an update or queue some form of an update operation to make that happen. If this were applied to a generic annotation case, you might imagine that there is a layer that's added to this that allows for a separate annotation surface that I can do the same operations on. What enables this is the fact that information on the page is described using standard vocabularies. So I'm looking at the new proposed extension for describing sports in schema.org as a way of collecting the information in here, folding in some of the new question and answer types of extensions, as well as the existing operations and social operations. Once I have that information, I can unambiguously understand the information on the page and interoperate with it in the way that's described through the API vocabulary. That, in theory, would allow me to interoperate with any page for which I could either extract such a definition and provide that to some other location. So the ways we're going about this is to be able to describe operations on entities. So if you look at an entity definition, we can enhance that definition with a set of operations. Those operations can have a set of properties that can in turn have their own operations, and moreover, I can describe these operations on the fundamental types. By doing that, now I'm divorced from the specifics of an information that's on one page, and can construct the way to be able to compose these operations on an arbitrary data source. Some of the outstanding problems are when does a property link to an entity versus to a page that describes entities. So we have a pagination problem, for instance. I've got many followers of a sports team. I can't list them all on one page. So we need to figure out a way of being able to reference these things without breaking the underlying RDF model. And then there are some various authentication and authorization issues, a number of different issues that still need to be resolved here. But we're quite interested in the direction this might go into and think it might be more widely applicable. More information, hydracg.com or on the W3C community group relationship, or contact me.